This is Small Worlds Audio. The day nothing happened. Nothing happened that day, and at first that seemed unremarkable. The morning arrived quietly, without urgency or announcement, settling into place the way it always did. Light filtered through the curtains and rested on the same section of wall it had for years, revealing the faint discoloration left behind by time and sun. The alarm sounded, was silenced, and forgotten. Coffee was made, stirred, and poured into the same cup used every morning. The day began already familiar, already in motion. Outside, the street carried on in its usual rhythm. A car passed, tyres humming softly against the road. A gate creaked open and closed somewhere nearby. Someone coughed, cleared their throat, then fell silent again. There was movement, but nothing that asked to be noticed. The air felt steady, unchanged, almost careful. The walk to work followed its usual pattern, guided more by habit than intention. The same crossing, the same pause at the traffic light, the same small group of people waiting without speaking. One person checked their phone repeatedly. Another stared straight ahead, eyes unfocused, already somewhere else. When the signal changed, they crossed together, steps briefly aligned before drifting apart again. Storefronts passed by without drawing attention. Signs that had been read 100 times were no longer read at all. Work unfolded without resistance. Messages arrived and were answered. Tasks were completed in the order they always were. A meeting began and ended exactly on time. Someone laughed politely at a comment that did not require laughter. Someone apologized for something that did not truly matter. At one point, a small decision was made quietly and without discussion, the kind that shaped nothing and would never be remembered as a decision at all. It was recorded, noted, and immediately replaced by the next small thing waiting to be done. Lunch was chosen out of habit rather than desire. It tasted exactly as expected. While eating, attention drifted toward the window, where clouds moved slowly across a pale, indifferent sky. They did not form anything recognizable and did not threaten rain. They were simply present, passing without meaning. The world continued outside at a distance, steady and unconcerned. As the afternoon wore on, a subtle awareness began to settle in. Not boredom, not dissatisfaction, just the growing sense that nothing had demanded a reaction. No interruptions, no surprises. Time moved forward evenly, without friction or resistance. The hours did not drag, but they did not rush either. They simply passed. The thought arrived gently, almost unnoticed, slipping into place rather than announcing itself. Nothing has happened today. It did not feel disappointing, and it did not feel comforting either. It simply existed, lingering longer than expected, before sinking quietly into the background, where it stayed. When work ended, it ended cleanly. There was no rush to leave and no reason to stay. The building emptied at a reasonable pace, people filing out without urgency. Outside, the air felt slightly cooler than it had that morning. The walk home followed the same route in reverse, past the same storefront with a display that had not changed in months, and the same uneven stretch of pavement that required a small adjustment in step. At the corner, an older man stood feeding birds with careful, deliberate movements, as if each piece of bread needed to be placed just right. The birds waited patiently, then surged forward all at once. The man smiled softly, not for anyone in particular, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone doing something familiar. It was a small moment, easy to miss, and it passed almost as soon as it was noticed. By the time the front door opened, The day had already begun to fold in on itself. Inside, the room was exactly as it had been left. Furniture remained in its place. The faint trace of coffee still lingered in the air. Shoes were set down neatly, without thought. The light was switched on, then switched off again when it proved unnecessary. Evening arrived slowly, without ceremony. Dinner was simple. Nothing new was tried. Nothing went wrong. The dishes were washed and placed carefully on the rack. Water was wiped from the counter. Hands rested on the edge of the sink longer than required, fingers pressing lightly against the cool surface, as if waiting for something else to happen. There was an attempt to recall something from the day that might stand out later, something worth holding on to, but the harder the mind searched, the more it came up empty. Conversations blurred together. Moments dissolved as soon as they were examined. Nothing insisted on being remembered. And slowly, that absence began to feel meaningful. Most of life, it seemed, was made of days like this. Not the dramatic days, not the days marked by celebration or regret, not the days remembered for their sharp edges, but the quiet ones, the unremarkable ones, the days that passed without asking anything in return. These were the days that filled the space between milestones, the days that made up the majority of time, the days that rarely found their way into stories. Outside, lights came on in nearby windows, one by one, without coordination. Somewhere, a television played softly. Somewhere else, someone practiced an instrument badly, then stopped. The world continued in small, overlapping sounds, none of them demanding attention. Sitting in the quiet, it became clear that the day had not been empty. It had simply been undisturbed. No sharp turns, no moments of impact, no reason to react or adjust course. It had moved forward gently, asking only to be lived. There was something steadying about that realization. So much effort was often spent anticipating change or resisting it, waiting for something significant to happen. But here was a day that had passed without interruption, and it had still carried weight. It had still existed fully. It had still taken up its place in time. Gratitude appeared unexpectedly, not for any specific event, but for having moved through the day intact. Unchanged, perhaps, but present. Night settled in fully. The room dimmed. The sounds outside softened. There was no urgency to sleep, and no desire to stay awake longer than necessary. The day felt complete, even without a defining moment to mark its end. Lying still, there was a brief acknowledgement that tomorrow would likely arrive the same way this one had. Light through the curtains, coffee, familiar streets, familiar tasks. Another day that might pass quietly, without announcement. And that was all right. Not every day needed to be remembered. Not every day needed to change anything. Some days existed simply to be lived, to fill time gently, to hold space between the moments that demanded more. Sometimes, the day nothing happened was the day that made that clear.